Good evening. I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me tonight on our news panel are Tom Vakar, consumer editor for KTVU News, and Rachel Gordon, City Hall reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, Cecily Burt, reporter for the Oakland Tribune, and Josh Richmond, legal and political affairs reporter, also with the Tribune. Well, Josh, out of the hundreds of bills that were on Governor Brown's desk for his signature, what were the most significant ones?
Well, Belle, the significance always lies a little bit in the eye of the beholder, and Jerry Brown managed to confound a lot of people by sort of pleasing and displeasing people on both sides of the aisle and on both sides of a lot of issues in equal measure. A very Jerry Brown kind of performance. You know, the rhetoric this week was governed from the middle, defied description, split the baby. He calls it the canoe theory. You got to paddle on the left and on the right to have a straight course. So, for instance, some of the more significant bills to make Democrats happy, he signed a bill that requires all ballot measures to be moved to November elections, which is significant because there's better turnout, which tends to favor Democrats in this state. He signed the California DREAM Act, which will allow undocumented college students to apply for public financial aid. He signed another bill that increases protection of farm workers' rights to organize when an employer acts in bad faith. And those were important Democratic things, but he also pleased some Republicans by vetoing a bill that would have allowed child care workers to organize. He vetoed a bill that would have permitted the UC and CSU systems to consider race, ethnicity, and gender in their admission policies. And that was something that the Republicans definitely wanted to see defeated. He wasn't always consistent in his reasoning. He sometimes he talks about consistence, and then sometimes he talks about it being the hobgoblin of little minds and stuff. But
wasn't he doing, though, what voters have been asking, our legislators to do, to not do the expected, but he's certainly living up to his promises of being a very independent governor who's not beholden to his own party necessarily or to the interests that back that party. You're probably doing something right, I guess, when you get praised in the same day by the California Labor Federation and the California Chamber of Commerce. If you're keeping all of these people happy, then it's got to be okay.
I mean, one thing that the governor complained about, and we said at the opening of the show, more than 500 bills landed before him for consideration. That seems kind of beyond ridiculous in some ways. Do we really? And that's this year, session, and it goes on and on and on. Has it become legislators just looking for something to put their name on, or do we really need to have these laws on the books that some people think?
Well,
is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. He had talked earlier about how the legislators were going to be singing the veto blues because he was going to veto a lot of bills they just thought were superfluous. Ultimately, overall this year, he only vetoed about 14% of the 889 bills that came to his desk. And that's lower than some numbers that got racked up by George Dugmasian or even by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he wasn't veto crazy by any stretch of the imagination.
And he read them all, you think?
Well, you'll have to ask him that.
Can I ask you, is he having a good time doing this? And what I mean by that is this is as tough a job as any governor in the state of California has ever had. And he went into it with a lot of zeal and gusto. Does he still have that, or is he realizing how tough this is?
I don't want to make any Zen jokes here, but I mean, Jerry Brown, he's not easily thrown, I think. He doesn't like to be seen being easily thrown, and he seems to be keeping his cool. Whether he's enjoying it, I think he probably is. There was some snarkiness, some little literary references and wordplay that snuck into some of the signing and veto messages. I think I think he is reading the bills, and I think he is having fun doing what he believes is right on a lot of these things, even if it makes some people happy or doesn't.
Well, there's something in the background, though, that's not making him very happy, and that's that
right.
The revenues aren't coming in, and he could be faced with making some cuts that he said he doesn't want to make.
It's ugly. Well, he won't have to make them necessarily. They'll be automatically triggered. What happened this week is that the state controller released his monthly report of the state's cash balance, where we were about $300 million below the projections this past month, and that's on top of a shortfall in September. So we're now about $705 million behind the budget projections. When that hits $1 billion, we got trouble. That's when the first round of trigger cuts kick in under the deal that was struck over the summer. And if it reaches even higher than that, if the revenues are short by $2 billion, then we get even more cuts. And what we're talking about here is some really painful stuff. We're talking about up to $1.7 billion pulled out of K-12. We're talking about losing a week of school in California if the worst comes to pass. We're talking about cuts to higher ed, to services for the seniors and disabled. It's going to be very ugly. And we won't know till December exactly what's going to happen because it's going to be based more on next year's cash projections, not the shortfalls that have existed.
Is there, besides the cuts, is there any talk at this point of trying to resurrect the sales tax that had expired or other revenue measures, or is that off the table now?
Well,
or for the time being?
I wouldn't say anything's off the table. And I think the fact that Jerry Brown did manage to come out of this legislative session getting praise from both labor and from big business means that if he does go looking for some sort of revenue adjustment next year, maybe they're less likely, they may not support it, but they may be less likely to shell out a whole lot of dough to oppose it as well. I think he's trying to keep people in a place where he can come to them for support.
I sort of cut you off. Were there other important bills, a couple more that you wanted to mention?
Oh, there
didn't
are
talk about
tons.
the shark fin.
We could talk about the shark fins. Sale, trade, and possession of shark fins is now illegal for all those people who enjoyed their shark fin soup. You can no longer buy alcohol at a self-checkout in California, which was something that was supported by both law enforcement but also by the labor unions who employ grocery clerks. You will be able to buy syringes at pharmacies without a prescription, which is something that Governor Schwarzenegger had vetoed last year. A whole slew of interesting things that sort of got lost in some of the hubbub this week, but there was a lot to dig into.
Well, he really came from some circumstances that required creativity in Oakland, where they still need more creativity over there, because we just have another story that just boiled over this week, and that was about the current mayor, Jean Quan, and her police chief, who decided to part ways this week.
Yes, he did.
Cecily, tell us about that.
Well, yes, Chief Anthony Bath did announce that he was resigning, and it surprised people. Its suddenness surprised people, but in reflection, I suppose it shouldn't have surprised too many people. If you recall, he was a finalist for the San Jose police chief job earlier this year. And when he didn't get that position, he had to think about whether he was going to stay in Oakland. He said he needed a couple of weeks to think about it. And so there you go. 2 years in, he's out. He didn't fulfill his 3-year contract, and now a new person that's risen from the ranks is stepping in.
Cecily, this comes at a time, I mean, it's not changed from what it's been like in Oakland, but crime is really on a lot of people's mind. They're the residents, the merchants. We've had some tragic events there when young kids have been shot just walking on the streets with their family. How does the mayor handle this now, and the city council and the new police chief coming in? I think that the residents must be a little skittish about the instability going on right now in the police department.
Well, the residents are very concerned. The council is concerned. I would have to think that the mayor is concerned. There was a poll that was just released that showed that her numbers are dwindling, that people are losing confidence in her ability to do something about crime. It's a real issue. There's the homicide rate is creeping up. We have I think there's 91 homicides already this year. There was 95 total all of last year. And as you say, people are, young children are getting shot in broad daylight. So it's sort of the wild, wild west out there. And then aside from that, you have a police chief who's getting pulled in different directions. Whether it was Batts or whether it's the new interim chief, Howard Jordan, he is getting pulled. You have a council that wants curfews or anti-loitering or gang injunctions, and then you have a mayor and some other parts of the council who are saying no, 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 no. You have one community who's asking for more police, and then you have others that are
did Batts say he has like 11 bosses he had to report to as well, that he couldn't do his job? Right,
he does. Jean Quan and her advisors are very, very hands-on, and he has said it's made it difficult for him to do his job. He's also has to answer to the federal court. There's a negotiated settlement agreement from the rioters case, the police misconduct case that's still hanging out there and keeps getting extended. And the latest report was that they had not met, they weren't doing a good job of keeping up with those mandates from the court. And so he has that hanging over his head. He has these all these bosses that he's reporting to. He's got, the community really loves him. They like that he goes out there.
So
but
how does the community and the rank and file in the police department and city council seem to feel about Jordan?
Well, I think that they obviously, the mayor appointed him as interim chief. This will be the second time around for him. If you recall, he was interim chief in 2009 when the 4 police officers were shot and killed. And he did a very good job, and he wanted the permanent job then. But then Mayor Ron Dellums hired Anthony Batts from Long Beach. I think that the rank and file like him. He's a homegrown person, if you will. He came up from within the ranks. He served on the school as a school's police chief, so he's very, very well known, and I think that will bode well for him.
And Anthony Batts, do you see him going back into law enforcement?
Well,
he's an impressive guy, to say the least.
He's an impressive guy. He's very charismatic. He's very, very intelligent. I think he came in and he really wanted to be the one to turn Oakland around, to help the city with its crime problem, and that just didn't happen. He could retire with practically his full pension, and I've heard that he's going to be teaching a class at Harvard. So whether he goes back into law enforcement, I don't think so.
We didn't mention this, but there were really some pretty rough feelings between the mayor and the police chief from the beginning. She said that she offered him the opportunity to leave earlier.
Well, I think early on, whenever there's a new change in the regime with new administration, that's one of the questions that you ask. Will you keep your city administrator? Will you make changes there? Will you keep the police chief? And she wasn't ever like an emphatic, oh yes, like a ringing endorsement. But then again, she didn't. I'd never heard that she was wanting him to leave.
Well, there will be more on this. In fact, you can tune in to Forum on KQED Public Radio on Monday morning at 9 to hear more about the Oakland Police Department and its problems. Thanks, Cecily. Well, in San Francisco, you've got an unusual situation. 16 people running for mayor, among other things. Rachel, why don't you tell us about the races, not just for mayor, but you've got
I mean,
other
unusual
offices too.
San Francisco. It seems that that's our motto, I think, here. But it is the November 8th election is coming up pretty quickly, and we do have a mayor's race. Who's going to be the permanent mayor, at least for the next 4 years, to replace Gavin Newsom? There's a mayor's race, a district attorney's race, a sheriff's race, several ballot measures. But this mayor's race is pretty interesting for a number of reasons. Top two, it's going to be picked by ranked choice voting. Voters for the first time are going to rank their mayoral choices number 1, number 2, and number 3, and it's going to be how the votes tallied. That's kind of thrown everyone in a tizzy going, we can't really project who's going to win this race. And there's also public financing in this campaign. One reason I think so many of the candidates who might have the second or third tier status in terms of not getting the endorsements and a lot of the fundraising on their own, or the campaign organizations are staying in the race, people are speculating, is because if they dropped out now, they'd have to pay back that money. So we do have a front runner, as polls have shown, and that's Mayor Ed Lee. He was appointed by Gavin Newsom when Newsom went to Sacramento. He decided about midway through this year that, boy, he said first, I'm not going to run for mayor. Then he decided he was going to run for mayor. That, again, threw the race in a very different direction because people weren't expecting to have an incumbent in office that they had to run against. And he's been a popular incumbent from the populace. But, boy, have the other opponents in the race, the rivals, have been hitting him hard.
Yeah, I've gotten a slew of mailers, and almost to a person, they're all going after Ed Lee. And I would imagine that is because he's the front runner, regardless of the fact that he changed his mind, a flip-flopper, so to speak. He's definitely the target.
Right. If whoever wins is not somebody who would least have been considered in the top tier, if this thing turns out because of this ranked voting system to work in a way that kind of surprises people, could that damage this thing, or do you think this is permanent, or is this a real test of ranked voting?
Well, it is. A ranked choice voting has been put to a test in a lot of places, and already Supervisor Sean Ellsburn, who's kind of the more conservative supervisor, the veteran supervisor in San Francisco right now, said as soon as this election's over, he wants to go after ranked choice voting. He wants to go after public financing. Now, it's something that the voters will have to decide on. But he's saying enough is enough. I mean, we saw what happened in Oakland when there was a surprise when Don Parada was supposed to be Mayor Parada, and now it's Mayor Kwan. Might that happen in San Francisco? At first, people said it's Ed Lee's, he's going to get it no matter what. Polls showed him at 35%. That's a pretty good thing for the first round. But it seems to be softening because he's been beat up on a number of issues. One of the big ones has been on ethics charges. Not charges, but allegations that not necessarily the mayor, but his campaign or some of the independent expenditures that have been put out there to support him have raised questions about who's really supporting him. He's had very tight alliances with former Mayor Willie Brown, who's been let's just say, a dynamic figure in city politics for a long time. Rose Pack, a lot of folks may not have heard about her, but insiders know of her as this Chinatown power broker. Who's really behind him? He's this very affable, long-time city bureaucrat, was city administrator, nice guy. Is he aware of what's going on around him?
Now, nothing's more fun than covering a debate with 16 candidates, obviously, but are they really distinguishing themselves on issues, or are there outliers at either end and then a whole clump of them in the middle? What's going on?
If you were a voter and you really cared about this, I'd say go to their websites, and that's the best place to see really where they stand on the issues. But you're right, when you go to a debate and you have a minute to answer a question, people are going to say these things. We really have to fix up our parks. We want Muni to run on time. There should be affordable housing for the middle and working class people. We really want to keep families in San Francisco. You can talk about all those nice things. The places where there's probably, I consider it the sleeper issue, where there's been the biggest divergence among the candidates is over the Central Subway project. That's bringing light rail underground into Chinatown from the downtown area. Ed Lee has been very forceful on that, and City Attorney Dennis Herrera was originally for it, but now he's saying that it's a bad project, it's a boondoggle, it's too costly for the number of people it's going to serve. That's really become the dividing issue.
How costly is it?
A little costly, $1.6 billion, I think. About $1 billion of that is going to be paid for by the federal government, maybe. And that's why it's interesting right now, is because for years, San Francisco has been in line, going up and up and up, getting closer and closer to the federal government, saying this is a new starts funding, special FTA, Federal Transportation Administration funding. We're going to have a subway there. So San Francisco's been, Board of Supervisors is for it, the Transportation Board, the mayors, and everyone. By the end of the year, early next year, the feds are supposed to make the final decision. Do you get that nearly $1 billion from us? The city family was saying this is a great project, and now there's kind of the rift in the city family, and people are going, this is not the time to show your disagreement. In fact, Supervisor John Avalos, who's kind of the progressive torchbearer in this race, who has a shot at winning probably, he's very much in favor of this project. He's saying, we hope that a mayoral election's not going to sabotage this project. David Chu, the Board of Supervisors president, who's in favor of it as well, is saying great cities build subways. Why turn this down? Other folks are saying it's just going to bankrupt Muni even more.
Well, Rachel, hasn't the work on that already started? I mean, how do they? I mean, what if they don't get that money? Right. What happens then?
Well, I think a few $100 million, peanuts, budget dust in capital projects has already been spent for getting the project kind of rolling. But really, the big money hasn't gone through. People in Chinatown have really wanted this. Folks are saying there are better ways to do it by making the buses run better. But this is the issue. Muni is a system that's used by a lot of people, and if you don't use Muni, you're glad that some people are, because it keeps more cars off the road. So they found this populist issue to disagree on.
You've got a couple of other races, sheriff's race, DA's race. Sheriff's race seems to have been narrowed down to very few people.
Right. There are 4 candidates, 3 front runners in this race, and this is to replace Sheriff Michael Hennessy, who's been in office for more than 3 decades. He's the longest-serving elected official in San Francisco history. He said, I'm tired of doing this now. He's going to step down. So you've got 3 people vying for it. And a very interesting thing, there's Supervisor Ross Mercarimi, who comes kind of from the progressive left. Chris Cunning, who's the former head of the Police Officers Association, a former beat cop, who also has been very involved in drug treatment programs. So he kind of comes with the treatment thing. And then Paul Miyamoto, who's a captain in the Sheriff's Department, is saying that, if anyone's going to carry out Mike Hennessy's legacy, I'm the one who's going to be able to do it. And some folks say you need an outside eye on that. So that's an interesting race. The latest poll has shown that those three are also running neck and neck, and it's ranked choice voting there as well.
And they're all very polite.
I watched their debate.
I moderated a debate, and the audience was even very polite.
And Sheriff Hennessy, as in he endorsed Mercury.
He has endorsed Mercury, and it's interesting how people are playing up their ties to him. So Mercury says, I have his endorsement. Paul Miyamoto, the captain, says, I have his professional endorsement because he's promoted me through the ranks. And Chris Cunny said, well, he's the one who picked me. He was an undersheriff for a little time as well, so he liked what I did. All of them said that they're going to carry on this very innovative programs that the sheriff put in place, which is really emphasizing treatment, education, other areas like that, not just pure punishment, to try to make the folks not land back in jail once they're released.
Well, the big elephant in the room is ranked choice voting, and I love it. The League of Women Voters always have a person come up front, like a kindergarten teacher, and take the audiences through it. Well, there might have been an opportunity for the next topic, Netflix, to have done better had they had somebody come to the front of the room and say,
what were they thinking is here's a company, South Bay-based company, phenomenal company, 25 million customers. 6 weeks ago, it was the darling of everybody, almost a cult-like kind of thing where, oh, I love Netflix, you know. I'm not going to pay for those cable things, and I get this, I can get all these DVDs that I want, and there's streaming stuff, and you know, this is just the greatest company. And then they decide, out of the clear blue sky, and it was pretty much out of the clear blue sky because their costs really are going up, to say, well, we're going to do this different now. Instead of doing one big service, we're going to have two services. One will be the DVD by mail thing that we've done since the beginning, and the other is going to be streaming. And instead of costing $10 for both services, it's going to cost you $8 for each, or $16, which is a 60% rate increase, which set off an internet tirade, the likes of which most people have never seen. It is somewhat akin to Bank of America saying, well, you know, we're going to lay 30,000 people off, but guess what? To make up for that, we're going to charge you $5 every month you use your debit card. I mean, it's just like these companies are paying no sense to their customers. And in the case of Netflix, this could have some very significant downside, because it is reported in September alone they lost 600,000 subscribers because they were that angry. Now, will they keep losing customers? Maybe, but for a lot of people it is so much cheaper, even at this higher price, than cable television, that they've certainly got, you know, some goodwill built up there. That's kind of the gist of it. But the behind the scenes thing that's going on is that the costs that are being demanded of them from the people that supply them programming are very high. In fact, they just made a deal a few days ago with Time Warner and the CW for $1 billion to get the rights to stream 8 of their entertainment programs. $1 billion. Now, this is for many years, but the bottom line is this is a lot of money, and that money's got to come from somewhere, and that money's going to come from where? It's going to come from the subscribers to Netflix.
Tom, let me ask you with this, how Netflix handled it. Was it the fact that they raised the subscription fee 60%, or was it the way they did it that angered people?
I think it was both. I think it was out of the clear blue sky, and I think it's just like people are so upset about the way things are going in general. And there are a few things that you really rely on, and you feel like you're cuddly and warm with it. And that was absolutely the customer feeling towards Netflix. It was just one of those warm, fuzzy things. And suddenly this warm, fuzzy thing shows that it has teeth and isn't necessarily that friendly. And the response was all the warm, fuzzy customers found out that they have teeth and it isn't that friendly, and this company is in trouble.
So Reed Hastings has been eating some serious crow about this, right?
So not only some serious crow, but now they've really got to be thinking about where do they go from here? What, you know, how are they going to get enough people to pay these huge, enormous expenses that they have to pay in order to get this programming that they want, and how are they going to convince people that it's still a very good deal? When you look at the cost of cable compared to the cost of this, it's still a very good deal, but you aren't dealing, you know, people aren't all warm and fuzzy about their cable companies. They're warm and fuzzy about Netflix, at least they were, and that's a problem for them. So they've got some real atonements ahead of them.
And Tom, what was the other misstep that they made, that name that they associated with their new company, Quickster?
Yeah, Quickster. That was the other thing, is that this is Netflix. So, you know, it's like, this is a brand, this is a brand. So now we're going to not only charge you more for this, we're going to call it Quickster, and people just didn't like that. So I don't know that Quickster itself was the gaffe. It was the idea that you take this really valuable service that people liked and were more than happy to pay $10 a month for, and they just looked at that other $6 and they said, it's not fair, we're not happy about it, and we're going to do something about it. And it is a work in progress.
Well, my thanks to all of you. We're very happy to have had you with us here tonight.